Connected labs, data from the bench to the cloud. Hi, everybody. I'm John Myer from Myer Media on behalf of PTP. And joining us today is Brantley from PTP. Brantley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, John.
Brantley, have you seen those shows where they do the day in the life of, right? And they kind of go through and walk through that. Can you actually talk us through what the day in the life of a bench scientist looks like from an early stage biotech company?
Yeah. So keywords there being a early stage biotech company. So that was my life for quite a while. When I first graduated college, I was in a couple different startups, and the I think underrated part of the day in the life of an early stage scientist is that you're wearing many hats. So in addition to the actual research, you're also going to be the lab manager and control things like procurement and maybe customer support, and you have to balance all of that along with your actual experimentation. So for me, it required a lot of very careful planning. So like every good scientist, my typical day was going to start with a planning period, or maybe the beginning of the week will be a planning period, and you're going to lay out all of the research and experiments you're going to do, and then you're going to walk through preparing your reagents, getting your cell lines ready, getting your instruments reserved, etc. You'll conduct those experiments, and then you'll review all of the results of those experiments. And all of that is going to fill more than a 12-hour day, usually at their early stage companies. So yeah, it's a it's a very, how would I say, it's a labor of love. So yeah.
Brantley, can you talk to me about some of the hats that you had to wear at an early stage?
Yeah. So like I said, in my case, I was often doing the lab management stuff on top of the research. So usually you've got 3 to 5 scientists in an early stage company, and you need to help out with things like making sure you have all of your consumables and reagents for all the experiments you want to do. And you need to make sure that all of your equipment's maintained. You have to make sure all of the waste streams you generate are going to be taken care of, so that you're not full of like empty boxes or disposable, bio waste, etc. Um, and then, in my case, I also worked in a commercial early stage lab. So we're also, creating and shipping out product, etc. So yeah, like I said, you end up wearing a lot of hats.
Did you also wear the hat of IT as well?
Sometimes, whether that was just making sure the internet was working, and sometimes it was also trying to figure out how to, maintain and disseminate all the data you're generating. So back 10 years ago, for me, that meant I would go in the lab, I would do whatever experiment, and take a paper lab notebook and transcribe all of that to some sort of digital format, and then do all the processing on my own machine, eventually push that to a Dropbox that hopefully my colleagues could also access. I was also collaborating with several universities, so there's this IT security aspect you have to worry about, and making sure that all of the data that you generate is disseminated to the correct people with the correct access, and making sure IP is guarded. And yeah, when you're in an early stage company that doesn't have any other assets, that can be quite a burden too. So.
Brantley, we kick things off with the title Connected Labs. What is a connected lab?
Yeah, so at least from the purview of PTP, a connected lab is one where you've taken all of your on-prem instrumentation and lab assets, and you've connected them with the cloud infrastructure, so that you've got one unified digital ecosystem.
When you're talking about connected and the cloud infrastructure, now keep in mind it could be a local, data storage, it could be a private data storage, but the cloud infrastructure is actually really key because a number of outside companies can connect to them and interchange and analyze and utilize your data without having to run around with your notebook that you were talking about.
Yeah.
When we talk about connected, is it also when the devices could actually pull the data from other devices in order to analyze it instead of you having to run around with a notebook?
Absolutely. So, as I was referencing earlier, when I was running around with a lab notebook, right, I would take my stuff, get it to my own PC and format. Sometimes that required me to go from an actual instrument with a USB stick and run over to my computer, right? Ideally, that's not what you do today. That's what I did. In a modern connected lab, what's happened is you've taken all of that instrumentation and it's already connected to something like a storage gateway or a data transfer setup, so that as you generate the data, it's from the wet lab scientists standpoint, they generate the data and then it's immediately sent to the cloud so that your colleagues or other collaborators can access it. So in a perfect world, right, um, like when I was working, I would say run a cell experiment, do some analysis that would produce information on like genetics. And then that information could be pushed to something that a bioinformatician could suddenly do analysis on. When I did it, right, it was like USB to my PC to Dropbox, et cetera. In a connected labs, it's just going to go straight from the sequencer up to the cloud, so that that raw data is going to be pushed into a pipeline, maybe some pre-processing's done. And so there's this immediate alleviation of that burden to move the data in a secure way and get it to the people that need to run the analytics post data generation.
Does it matter where you're connected or how you're connected?
Yeah. I mean, in a in an environment where you've set up the secure network that you ideally have, where you're trying to do some IP guarding, right? You don't have to worry about moving things around like the USB stick, right? If you are doing something a little bit older, style like that, you run the risk of information security issues where people can intercept your data. You also run into a very common problem, which is just data loss, right? So if I get caught up in, say, feeding my cell line while I was in between instrumentation and I forget to put that USB stick into my computer, right? And that data, that I could lose the data stick, right? So your drive is lost and now you have to repeat that experiment. Um, or just some other fumble, so that while you're trying to get that data to the correct people, right, if you get sidetracked and you're not in an optimized automated environment, you could have people waiting on the back end for something that they may not be able to touch for a couple days because you got caught in between things.
Brantley, do you feel it's really important to actually be connected to a cloud or take advantage of cloud services and the providers and what they have to offer?
Today, yes, absolutely. There are so many technologies and services available, particularly for labs today, that I didn't realize were around at the time that I was working, either because we didn't have the education on it or it was cost prohibitive, that today are really quite accessible to most scientists and laboratories. They really improve the efficiency and optimization of lab operations, but also they really set you up for what should ultimately be your goal, which is to get some sort of new product or device or drug to market. And all of that's going to require some sort of, FDA submission or whatever other regulatory entity happens to have purview over your stuff. And having cloud services and automations put in place allows you to do the, data lineage tracking and all of the uh, audits that are going to come with, doing some sort of submission.
How important is it to have the right skill sets to understand how to connect these labs or these devices and environments to the cloud?
Well, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, right? So I think, in my experience, a lot of academics and PhDs are used to having to figure out how to do every little aspect of their workflow. Anymore, I really think, like, you could use a service like PTP that really helps augment that skill set. So you should be aware of it, but the reality is there are a lot of really great service providers that will help you do that pretty seamlessly and cost effectively.
When I think of a bioinformatic person and a scientist, and I think their job is to obviously do their plan, analyze the data, run all the, work with the instruments, but not work with the underlying, right? How to connect things. And I think what I'm trying to get at is you could spend so much time trying to connect these devices to the cloud, spend half your day, half your 12-hour shift doing it,
Yeah.
that it could be meant doing other things more important. to what your job entails.
Absolutely. I guess that's what I'm also trying to get at is, in an ideal world, right, your scientists are doing science and they're not being sysadmins. Um,
Well
sometimes,
put.
yeah.
Well put. Definitely. So, Brantley, let's actually move on a little bit. And I got another two more questions for you before I wrap it up. So, did you actually strive to achieve early adoption or a vision of a connected lab with regards to biotech's life cycle?
So historically, I don't think that was the case, but today I think it's more important than ever. There's this a joke that I've heard a lot in the biotech community, and it's you can't move faster than the speed of biology. And the joke being like, 9 women can't birth a baby in 1 month, right? Like biology is slow, and every minute counts when you're developing some sort of biotech because you can't usually move faster than the speed of biology. So when you look at the entire life cycle of developing some sort of biotech, you don't want to be a year or two into your process and have accrued all the technical debt that's probably going to catch up to you whenever you get ready for that moment where you're going to do your FDA submission, et cetera, or your product submission. If you adopt cloud tech earlier, it's much easier to scale it. You can do it in a compartmentalized or modular fashion so that it's both digestible from a cost standpoint, but also it's going to push off a lot of costs that could actually end up killing your product or project later down the line because you don't address it earlier.
And you have to redevelop it. You have to actually
Exactly.
re-implement it. You have to redo the data pipeline in order to make it more efficient. You have to reduce the technical debt. I think what you're getting at, and I fully agree with you, is if you take the time now to analyze the entire life cycle of your data, your connected lab, the instruments of it, and whether you can do it yourself or you actually bring on an MSP to do it, it will be better in the early stages rather than in the end when you go for your FDA and then, holy crap, my costs are way up there and now I have to reduce all this technical debt.
Absolutely. Setting up a scalable architecture earlier is ultimately way more cost effective by orders of magnitude than doing a late stage lift and shift where you've done all this stuff on prem and now you need to get it into the cloud because now you're finally collaborating with a bunch of other people and you want to do those submissions and audits and stuff that go with the biotech development lifecycle.
Brandley, my last question for you is how are connected labs helping to reduce experimental waste?
So I mean, we've kind of already hit on it, but where I immediately go to is the sudden realization that you've got some sort of data loss, right? So in the body of work that goes into some sort of submission, it all of that gets audited, and if you find that you're missing a piece of data because you ran this experiment a year and a half ago, and that fed into some other body of work, and you can't show that, you end up ultimately having to repeat that to the QC and verification validation that goes into either a device or a drug development.
Brandley, I got to thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me, John.
Well, everybody, this has been Connected Labs, data from the bench to the cloud. I'm John Myer from Myer Media on behalf of PTP, and thanks for joining us today.